It's a real privilege for me to be here today. Thank you for this opportunity. I want to thank the Gospel at Work folks as well as our host here at Covenant Life. It's a tremendous opportunity they've provided. But most of all, I'd like to thank you. I hope you realize how special it is that so many of you are still here at 2:45 in the afternoon on a Saturday to listen to the events at this conference. It's a well-known expression that most of us over-invest in our career, under-invest in our families, and eternity. And so I just think it's terrific that so many of you are willing to be here, spend this day, and invest some time for eternity. So thank you. I just really am taken with how many of you are here and still here after a long day. I think it's a tribute to the great speakers that we've had today. I get to share some of my personal experiences over my career, which I'm still participating in different forms. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about what my experiences regarding faith in the workplace. So I'll start at the beginning. In the beginning. You've all heard that phrase before someplace, right? And I go back to the beginning, literally, to my first day at work. I don't have a great memory, but I can remember that day like it was yesterday, as this way goes. I remember the guy I was talking to, what his name was, what we were talking about. It was the personnel manager in this multi-industry company that I've gotten a job with. My first day at work, I was in the HR department signing forms, filling out W-4s, payroll forms and all that stuff, healthcare forms. And he said to me, "Lou, you're really going to enjoy working here. We've got great technology, we've got super people, we do interesting things. It's really going to be a blast. I think you're going to fit in real well. There's only two things we don't do here. We don't talk about religion, and we don't talk about politics." Well, not having worked before, that made sense to me. And I, at that time, had no burning desire to talk about either one of those anyway, so it was not a problem with me. But it always stuck with me. And I bring that up because I doubt that many people hear that today anymore, overtly. But I believe all of us hear that quietly, whether it's raised eyebrows, whether it's commentary when we talk about our faith. It's there, it's real, and people have to deal with it. For me, for many years, I didn't have to deal with it because I was a go-to-church on Sunday Christian, and it wasn't until later in my career, much later in my career, that I made a commitment to Christ that changed my life and the way I thought about work and the way I went about my work. And what happened, first of all, was, and this, I can't say it was planful, but this happened as a result of my study. It happened slowly. It happened over time. People began to learn about my faith, not because I told them about it, but things happened. I said things. If somebody came to my office or I met them in the hall and they were telling me about some terrible problem that they had at home or an illness in the family or something, I'd say, "I'd like to pray with you." And we'd stop there and pray. A lot of startled people around when that happens, but nobody ever turned me down. I started to, and I was fortunate because I had a wife that knew what I was doing, knew what was going on at my work, and she prayed for me and my work every day. I believe that had a great impact. And anybody who is fortunate, blessed enough to have a spouse to do that with them, I want to make sure you count your blessings and understand how important that is. I also found that many times a problem would come up, an issue would come up that I had absolutely no answer for, didn't have a solution, didn't know what to do. Serious problems. And very often there weren't many people I could talk about these problems with. I was forced, as last resort, I had nothing else to do but pray. But the more I prayed, the more important I found out that was. I could pray at work at any time. And what would happen is I'd have this issue that I didn't know an answer for, had no way of getting out of a problem, and the next day I'd come to work and the phone would ring, and on the other end of that phone was a solution. Not only was it a solution, but it was a much better solution and answer than I could have ever dreamed about. Nothing even entered my mind about those things. I can't tell you how many times that happened. So I'm just encouraging you, as I'm sure many of you know already, just how important prayer is in your daily work activity. And if you have other people at work that you can pray with, that's even better. And have a group of people to work with. What happened then, as I started doing these things, people started to recognize how important my faith was to me. And then something surprising happened. They all started telling me about their faith. I had no idea how many Christians there were in the workplace. They're all there, but they won't raise their hand. They're all around you, wherever you work, I guarantee you. If you will expose, and I use that word carefully, your faith by your words, your actions, your deeds, people will relate to that, and they will respond to you. They'll ask you questions, and they will tell you about their faith. I'll tell you one story. I'd worked with one guy for years. He was a great guy. He was a general manager, ran a very important division, did a spectacular job. And he retired, and due to schedule conflicts, I didn't get a chance to make his retirement party. So after that was over, schedules worked out, I invited him up to New York. Him and his wife, my wife and I took him and his wife out to dinner to thank him personally for the great work that he had done. And I'm telling his wife what a great job he had done, what a great leader he was, how he had not only helped the company, but his customers and his customers' company. He had really made a difference in this world. And he said, Lou, stop. You don't understand. I had an unfair competitive advantage. Whoa, what does that mean? In today's world, you got to worry about that when somebody says that. He says, Neil, what do you mean? What are you trying to tell me? He said, Lou, everybody in the company knew that at 7 o'clock in the morning, everybody was welcome into my office to pray for that day. And every proposal that went out of that plant, all the years that I was there, first stopped in my office, no matter how many volumes there were in it. Those in the government business know what I mean by volumes in a proposal. And all the volumes would be piled in the middle of the floor in my office, and it was an open invitation for anybody to come and pray with me about that proposal. That's why we were so successful. That's what changed the environment where we worked. That's what allowed people to do things together that normally wouldn't be done. I believe that was our unfair competitive advantage. That's one that the Lord offers to each and every one of us. I also will tell you that it changed my leadership style. As I learned more about the key factors that I learned about in the gospel, about Lord wanting to have a personal relationship with me, a daily personal relationship, and wanting me to have a loving relationship with my neighbors, the people around me, the people in the office, I started thinking differently about our employees. I had to. I was forced to, faced with that issue, and I hadn't been doing a very good job in terms of relating to people and recognizing them as more than employees and workers, but as God's children and people who had a contribution to make. And I was amazed at what I found out when I got to know people and started asking questions about how much they had to offer than what they just provided at work. Not because they didn't have the talents or skills, but either they weren't asked or they had other interests, which was fine. But it was amazing what they could do. And what it allowed me to do, it brought me great joy, because it allowed me to become someone who worried about where we were going to get tomorrow's leaders from, to somebody who was concerned about where we were going to get all the opportunities for the great people that we had in this organization and how we were going to take advantage of all of them. Changed my just whole outlook on what I was doing and what the importance of some things were. Anyway, I left there. I chose to retire early. Things were going too well. And I left, and I told the board that I wanted to leave to do some faith-related things. They all asked me why and what I was going to do, and I said, I have no idea. But I feel like the Lord is suggesting that I do something else. I've been at this for 39 years, and He's given me this message that I feel like I ought to do something else. Not that He couldn't use me where I was, so I left. I had no idea what to do. You saw a lot of the stuff on the bio there this morning. I will tell you this, that other than living in Virginia, where my kids and grandkids live, there's nothing that I'm doing today that I even thought about doing when I left work. or I left ITT. All of these were opportunities that came up. Most of them are a surprise to me. Things I didn't even know about, never thought about. Not one of those things is something I even considered doing. I think there were opportunities, doors that the Lord presented to me, which I had to be willing to listen and take in. Some of them were things that I really wasn't kind of too keen on doing, but as it turned out, they've been a great blessing to me. One of the things that happened was Workforce Ministries. You heard a little bit about that. This is an organization that when I got back here, the pastor of the church I was going to called me one day and said, I've got a couple of guys that keep asking me about what they can do about faith in the workplace. Can they do Bible studies? What's legal? What's within company policy? And I said, well, I don't know the answers to that, but I'd be glad to have lunch with you. And we met, and out of those discussions came Workforce Ministries. It would be too strong for me to call it an organization. It's a group of volunteers who for 9 years now has been getting together and and inviting speakers in for no other reason to encourage believers in the workplace. That issue that I'd seen at work about there being so many believers, but everybody afraid to raise their hand, came home to roost. The Lord dumped this in my lap, literally, and we've been able to continue it going. We have great speakers. We have access to great speakers, people from around the world who come in. We hold 4 or 5 of these sessions a year, sometimes 6. They're usually in Northern Virginia. We try to do it at a business location, places like AOL or Oracle, if they'll allow us. Other than that, we'll do churches. There are people telling their life stories about how they were able to integrate their life's work and their faith. What the issues were, you've heard many of those type of topics today, how they managed through that, but they were able to do it, and they continue to do it today. One of the key messages out of that is it's possible to have a successful career and be a 24/7 Christian. In fact, I believe it's more likely that you will have a successful career if you're a 24/7 Christian. But we hear those stories all the time. People tell us about it. And one of the things that I want to go back and touch on too about my own walk was when I started thinking about people differently, I started realizing that a leader should not only be concerned about what people are doing, what job and job functions and how well they're doing it, but who they are and who they are becoming. Because that's really the issue that allows all other things to happen. When you get people who know how to work together, who care about each other, who recognize that they're doing something for a greater good, things start to happen in miraculous ways. Matter of fact, I like this issue of who we are and who we will be is an important one, I think, and no matter what you do, whether you're working in the home, whether you're working in a large organization, small organization, or no organization. And I like to, everybody's heard about the Sermon on the Mount. You've all read it, know what it says. When I read it, I was reading it a few years ago, and it starts out in Matthew saying the crowds were forming, and Jesus took his disciples and went up on the hill, and he started talking to them, and then the Sermon on the Mount unfolds. I like to consider that Jesus' first staff meeting. He wasn't talking about what they were going to do, how many converts we were going to create, what cities we were going to go to. He was talking about who are we going to be? How are we going to relate to the people around us? How are we going to treat people around us? Because that's the real essence of leadership and what's important and the foundation for all other things happening. So it's an important concept. One of the common threads through most of our speakers at Workforce Ministries is no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, and you've heard this before today, be the best employee there is. Certainly the best employee you can possibly be. Put the company's goals before yours, if necessary. Treat the people around you, no matter how they treat you, with respect. Get your work done. Overdo your work. Make a difference. Be seen as somebody making a difference around you. You have to know your environment. As I said, some companies are very tolerant. AOL, who hosts us, has a very tolerant policy towards faith-based affinity groups. Many companies don't want anything to do with it. Just, let's not go there. I don't want to cause problems. We're just not going to do there. You have to know where you are, but taking in that consideration, the primary issue is your relationship with the Lord and what He's asking you to do. The opportunities that He's presenting to you. What you can do with the skills you have, the opportunities that you have, and the people around you. By the way that you treat them, by the questions that they ask. These are all potential opportunities to open up. So, even when you work in a difficult part of the spectrum, you're over on the end, we don't want to deal with this faith-related stuff. We don't want to hear you talking about it. Remember something important. Nobody, I don't care what company it is, where they are on the spectrum, nobody can complain about competency, compassion, and character. If you bring all those to your job, nobody will complain. You will make a difference. You will make an impact. I know that another important message that we hear all the time is be an aggressive responder. You don't have to go out and worry about how I'm going to evangelize to somebody. But when somebody creates an opportunity for you, don't pass it up. Lord asks us to be aggressive responders in all that we do. One of our speakers many years ago, senior VP from PNC Bank, had been conducting a Bible study for that at that time for 17 years. And one of the questions he got was, how'd you start this Bible study? Did you send out an email? Did you invite people? Did you ask people to join your Bible study? Were you able to use the company property? Do you do it in a company facility? And he said, I didn't ask anybody to do a Bible study. I didn't start a Bible study. He said, I had a woman one day come into my office that had a problem. She said, can I talk to you about this? And we talked. We talked for a while. Next week, she shows up again. She said, I got a few more questions. They talked about it. And this time, I was able to share with her some wisdom that I'd gotten out of Scripture that I thought related to her problem. The next week, she brought a friend in with her, sat down and said, I'd like to understand more about that Scripture. It's now 17 years later. We have about 20 people a week come in for a Bible study. I never started a Bible study. Be an aggressive responder. There's opportunities all over. And if you don't see them there and they're not in your office, take somebody out to lunch and see if you can find somebody off campus that has a need that you can fill and by responding. Okay, another big question that always comes up is, can I do this for my work, or am I being called into the ministry? We heard about that a little bit. All the time. What should I be doing? Can you really do Christian work in a secular workplace given the environment that we have and everything else? God created us all for work. God's plan is for us to take care of His humankind through producing goods and services to take care of people, feeding people, and whatever. It's evolved today in our system, but God created us for that. God worked. He asked us to work. He continues to ask us to work. What we also said, and this was pointed out this morning too, in 1 Peter 2:9, if you're a Christian, first you are a priest. So no matter where you are and what you're doing, you are a priest. You've already been anointed as a priest to serve God's purposes. You can have a secular job also, but in that secular job, you're still a priest. Work that way, behave that way, think that way, it has an impact. Well, and I think this is best summed up. Let me sum up that quickly by saying, with a quote from Dorothy Sayers. Dorothy was an English woman who wrote about this issue of faith in the workplace in the 40s. Yeah, they were talking about this back in the 40s. And her key message was, the only Christian work is good work well done. So no matter where you are, what you're doing, that's your answer. No matter where God's placed you, It can be Christian work just like ministering from the pulpit. So, where you are, recognize that God put you there. He's asking you to do something where you are. And I'll leave you with one more quote from one of our favorite speakers, Henry Blackaby, who at one of his sessions with us said, God is in every workplace, and he will have an impact in that workplace as long as there is one believer. Let that believer be you. Thank you. Godspeed.